August 26th, 1346. A cold rain lashes the muddy fields near the small French village of Crécy. 9,000 exhausted English soldiers brace for impact against an army 3 times their size. 30,000 of Europe's proudest knights. Clad in glittering armor, armed with lances and pride, the French appear unstoppable. They are the embodiment of medieval nobility, confident, arrogant, and utterly certain of victory. Some lords even argue over who will have the honor of taking the English king's head. 4 hours later, the same field lies silent, except for the cries of the dying. Over 1,500 French nobles are dead, their golden armor caked in blood and mud. Among them lie princes, dukes, and even kings. The English? Fewer than 40 lost. In one afternoon, 5 centuries of chivalric dominance collapsed, destroyed by peasants armed with nothing more than wood and string. The Battle of Crécy was not just a victory, it was a revolution. The moment the sword gave way to the bow, and the myth of noble invincibility drowned in the mud. Edward III of England had landed in Normandy weeks earlier with 15,000 men, claiming the French throne through his mother's bloodline. His campaign was brutal, a chevauchée, a scorched earth raid meant to expose the French king's failure to protect his people. Villages burned, crops turned to ash, and terrified peasants fled before the English advance. King Philip VI of France could not allow this humiliation. He gathered the greatest host Europe had ever seen, 35,000 men, including 12,000 armored cavalry. These were not ordinary soldiers. Nearly every great noble of France was there, joined by kings and princes from across the continent, the Holy Roman Empire, Bohemia, Moravia. It was a medieval Avengers assemble, united by one purpose, to crush the English. For centuries, the mounted knight was the tank of his age, raised for war from birth, encased in steel, astride a war horse worth more than a peasant village. When knights charged, armies broke. Infantry existed to die beneath their hooves. But Edward III saw the future. He commanded 9,000 men, including 5,000 longbowmen from England and Wales, most of them commoners or criminals. For decades, English law had required every man to practice archery after church each Sunday. It wasn't sport, it was preparation. And now that preparation would end an era. The English longbow was simple, 6 feet of yew wood, but in trained hands, it was a machine of destruction. A skilled archer could loose 12 arrows a minute, each capable of piercing armor at close range. Edward positioned his men on high ground near Crécy. Archers formed a wide V shape to create overlapping fields of fire. Then, in an unprecedented move, Edward ordered his knights to dismount and fight on foot beside the archers. This was unthinkable. Nobles abandoning their horses, standing shoulder to shoulder with peasants. Yet Edward knew pride would not stop arrows, only discipline would. That night, the English camp worked methodically. Archers waxed their bowstrings against the rain. Stakes were driven into the ground, pits dug before the lines. By dawn, they were ready. Across the valley, the French were chaos wrapped in splendor. Banners fluttered, armor gleamed, and arrogance reigned. Hungry, exhausted, and undisciplined, they mocked the English from afar, confident that sheer numbers would crush them. Philip VI ordered his men to wait until morning, but his nobles refused. "Glory waits for no man," they shouted. One charge began, and the rest followed. What should have been an army became a mob, a storm of vanity and steel thundering uphill into the jaws of death. At the front marched 5,000 Genoese crossbowmen, professional mercenaries hired to break the English line. But disaster struck immediately. Their heavy shields were still in the baggage train, and the rain had ruined their bowstrings. When the Genoese fired, most of their bolts fell short. The English archers, who had kept their strings dry under their helmets, returned fire, and the sky darkened. Thousands of arrows hissed through the rain, striking armor, flesh, and horse alike. The Genoese broke and fled, but the French knights behind them saw cowardice, not disaster. Count d'Alençon roared, "Cut down these cowards!" and the mounted nobles spurred forward, trampling and slaughtering their own allies in rage. It was chaos, a battlefield turning against itself. The first cavalry wave charged uphill, mud sucking at hooves. English arrows whistled like rain. Horses screamed, stumbled, and collapsed under the weight of steel and death. Arrows found joints, visors, and the soft gaps where armor could not protect. Knights tumbled in heaps. Those who fell were trapped, crushed by their comrades, drowned in mud, or suffocated under armor that had once been their pride. The French charged again and again, 16 times in total, each wave smaller, more desperate, more doomed. When arrows ran out, English archers waded into the field, yanking arrows from corpses and shooting them back. The French died by their own iron. Then came one of history's most tragic acts of valor, the blind King John of Bohemia. Unable to see for years, he refused to abandon the field. "A king of Bohemia does not flee from battle," he declared. He ordered his knights to tie their horses together so they could lead him into the fight. They charged straight into the English lines. Moments later, all were dead. When his body was found, he was still bound to his companions, sword in hand. Prince Edward, the Black Prince, so admired his courage that he adopted the king's emblem, 3 ostrich feathers, and the motto, "Ich dien," I serve. It remains the symbol of the Prince of Wales today. By nightfall, Crécy was a charnel house. French nobles charged again and again, climbing over their own dead in pursuit of glory. Philip VI himself was wounded by an arrow through the face and barely escaped with his life. When dawn came, the truth was undeniable. 1,500 French nobles lay dead. 11 princes, dozens of counts and dukes, the elite of medieval Europe. The English had lost only 40 men. It was the death of an era. For centuries, knights had captured enemies for ransom, not killed them. War was a game of wealth and honor. But at Crécy, English peasants broke that code. They killed indiscriminately. Nobility meant nothing in the face of arrows. The psychological impact was enormous. The illusion of divine superiority shattered. If a Welsh peasant could kill a French duke, what was nobility worth? The aftermath was grim. Corpses carpeted the field. Crows grew so fat they could barely fly. Peasants scavenged armor and jewelry from noble corpses, treasures that would make them rich for life. The once proud aristocracy of France lay in ruins. Entire provinces were leaderless. The French army had to be rebuilt from scratch, and for the first time, they began to copy the English, training native archers, emphasizing discipline over glory. But the romance of the mounted knight was gone forever. Crécy marked the birth of modern warfare, where planning, technology, and discipline triumphed over courage and pride. Even then, France failed to learn. 10 years later, at Poitiers, they repeated the same mistake and suffered the same humiliation. The Battle of Crécy didn't just end a war, it ended an idea, the belief that noble blood made a man superior. The Longbowmen of England, peasants who practiced after church, had rewritten the rules of history. In that muddy field in northern France, chivalry died, slain not by kings or princes, but by common men with bent wood and string. The English didn't just win a battle, they proved that courage alone could not defeat discipline, that pride could not stop arrows, and that the age of the knight was over. If you love stories of history's bloodiest and most decisive battles, subscribe for more. This was the Battle of Crécy, the day medieval warfare died in the mud.